But just to help people maybe appreciate it the most, you started this segment out by mentioning how we've seen these weight loss drugs rise and fall. What's so interesting about the GLP-1 agonists is that the fall appears to be patient-induced. Even within the UK, the statistics find that after 24 months of use of GLP-1 agonists, over 65% of people have chosen to stop taking it. They get so tired of feeling sick.
Yeah.
What we say is the food noise is quieted down. I don't crave as much. That's a nice way of saying I constantly feel like I'm going to vomit. And they'll have what they call Ozempic burps. It's kind of a joke where you have food sitting in your stomach for so long that it starts to fester and creating these noxious fumes that are bubbling up your esophagus. Now your breath is horrific. You're burping all of these gases up. And the person just says, I don't want to take this anymore. I'd rather be a little chubby or fat than feel like this all the time. And not to mention the reports that document how they find that everything just turns gray. Not that they're depressed. It's almost as if life becomes very flat. That's what I mean to convey. What used to drive them, what they used to be very passionate about, they're not anymore. So there are these reports of people who they like to go on hikes. Now they don't really care about hiking anymore. They're taking everything they really cared a lot about, including eating. So that one addiction somewhat addressed, one passion addressed, which is a passion for eating food. And they're sort of driving everything down to this flat level where they just don't, they're apathetic. Rather than maybe being depressed, I want to try to be precise with my wording. Apathy is probably the more apt word here. That they just don't care as much about the things they used to care about. As body weight changes, so too does metabolic rate. That's a known phenomenon. Usually a person loses weight, metabolic rate comes down, they start to gain it, metabolic rate will come back up. Mind you, it lags a little, which is why it's so easy to gain the weight back. However, the NIH in the US published a paper finding that in people who experience dramatic weight loss through eat less, exercise more, specifically, it was based on a set of people who had participated in that game show, The Biggest Loser, which I think you guys have seen here in the UK, or you may have your own version.
Yeah,
or you just broadcast
I've never seen the reunion party yet.
Exactly. And you never will because they gain it all back. But what they found in that study was that as they gain the weight back, metabolic rate doesn't follow. They've uncoupled these two. It is like they broke it. I hate to use such an imprecise word, but it's like they have broken that metabolic response. And interestingly, a study just published, a very big meta-analysis from a high kind of biological computational lab, looked at every available study that was ever published that looked at low-carb or high-carb diets that had lost weight, and then looked at what happened to the metabolic rate. And they found that on the low-fat, high-carb version, calorie-matched, always low-calorie, which, again, I'm not totally in favor of, let calories take care of themselves. They found that that was a group whose metabolic weight went down the most with their weight loss. So low carb versus low fat, they both lost weight. This group had a substantial reduction in their metabolic rate. This group didn't. Their metabolic rate stayed the same. It was not a statistically significant drop. That is profound. Don't tell me. So that's part of my frustration with these studies that last for 2 weeks. And it's calorie controlled. Every meal's coming out of the lab. What happens the next 2 weeks? And then what about the next 2 weeks or the next 2 months or the next 2 years? Don't try to fool me with this kind of wordsmithing and confusing of the data. If your metabolic rate, even with the weight loss, has stayed as high as it was before, you've broken the system, but in a highly advantageous way. You've uncoupled the metabolic rate from body weight, but now in your favor rather than against you, like what's happening in the other group. One of those groups is going to gain their weight back very quickly, in part because they fail because they're facing hunger. The other group, who's learning to rely on their own fat for fuel, will not be left facing hunger. They find that they can go times without eating. And indeed, the food noise is a little quieter because the brain is sensing, I got all the energy I need. Because of this low insulin state, glucose levels are normal. Free fatty acids are higher because of the fat burning. Ketones are high. I got all the energy I need.